With us this month is Bruce Piasecki, the president and founder of the AHC Group, as well as the author of the recently published Doing More with Less. Thanks for joining us, Bruce.
My pleasure, Becky.
Well, that's an interesting book title, Bruce, since our viewers as corporate financial executives are under increased pressure to cut costs these days. It seems as if every business wants their workers to do more with less, don't they?
After 30 years, the way I think about it is that financial executives really do three things. They manage money, they manage people, and they manage rules. So, for example, the external world is always giving them the new FASB standard or the new rules. In terms of people, it's the comptroller, it's the financial planners, it's the technical guys, and in terms of money, it's the relationship of the cost of capital and creditworthiness. Doing more with less is success because it enables you a new approach to money, people, and rules.
Let me follow up, Bruce, and ask you, what's driving this move to do more with less? Is it based on profitability, or in some cases, is it just a matter of plain old frugality?
It boils down in today's world of controlling the positioning of your near future. And so the firms that are being respected in automaking, such as Toyota, the investment community understands them as having positioned for the future. They have the hybrid powertrain, they have lean manufacture, they understand a world a little bit better of 7 billion souls. So that for me, doing more with less is about positioning the value of the firm towards the near future, and the arts of competitive frugality are the arts executives need to refine in order to position for the future, as opposed to just being completely reactive. So the way I visualize it is that financial managers are the people in a very large corporate mansion. But what increasingly matters today is how they're doing in the neighborhood. What information are they disclosing? What are the corporate disclosure trends? Who are they letting peek into the mansion? What stakeholders are they inviting up the stairwell of the mansion? All of these things can be done more efficiently and more productively with this mantra of doing more with less.
Well, it's not human nature to want to do more work. And you know our viewers, they already feel overwhelmed in recent years by increased demands along with reduced resources. What's the case for going that extra mile?
Well, I think, Becky, if the question is about how the executive receives the respect to do extra performance, let me say it to you this way. Essentially, if your job is to better align and balance money, people, and rules, you come to discover that there's a couple of tools you have in order to do more with less. The first is the classical one of rewarding people through incentive and also having the ability through disincentive to eliminate the knucklehead. But you deal with people with vision and passion and the music you play while administering those financial incentives and disincentives. So I've come to believe that the greatest teams and the greatest performers are not only doing it for money, they're doing it out of pride, they're doing it out of brand, and they're doing it out of joy and satisfaction. And what I have found the most compelling feature of competing on frugality is that the people stick with you in a loyal way because they know you're strong and steady, just like a competitive basketball team or a competitive football team. If you manage too tightly and have a rule-dominated firm, people are going to be in the absence of freedom. If you manage too freely, you're going to have a bunch of knuckleheads. And so my work is very much about finding that productive balance as a management consultant and in operating my own firm over these last 30 years. And it got me thinking about how much waste there is in the modern corporation due to knuckleheads. The comptroller, the corporate planning officers, the CFO, the senior management team actually have a new obligation in the post-world of Sarbanes-Oxley to document the elimination of that type of waste. The people in the system who are wasting their time, the people in the system who are wasting their resources, banging their head against a clear glass that will in no way influence the game of the firm.
I know it's the title of your latest book, Bruce, and I like that concept of competitive frugality. But tell me, what does that mean in this context?
Let me give you a couple examples, Becky. And Pat Mahoney in the chapter Scarcity and creativity, is to me an extremely creative financial manager for several classical reasons. So he builds a $1.2 billion Fairfield renewable energy facility. Classical financial frugality. He gets Obama stimulus money for this plant. He gets the governor of Maryland to say, at the right time politically, I'm proud that we're doing this innovation. He moves processed waste from the eastern seaboard, brings it to Baltimore Harbor, and from a different client of ours, leases for 100 years contaminated soil for 5 cents to the dollar, and uses another corporate affiliate of my firm, Arcadis, to clean it up within superior limits so that the governor and the mayor and the EPA likes the guy. So he's taking a damaged asset, he's bringing new life to it, he's providing energy out of waste, and to me it's an embodiment of the opposite of a knucklehead. It's a very Ben Franklin-like approach to modern competition because he's frugal, he's inventive, and he's also diplomatic with stakeholders.
Well, most of our American viewers certainly can relate to Ben Franklin, but you know our viewers and their companies, Bruce, since many of them are your clients. These days they have operations and staff around the globe. I'm curious, to what extent is this type of frugality strictly a Western phenomenon?
Excellent question, Becky. Lately, what I've become to realize in the third decade of my career as a management consultant is that some of the fundamental principles in this new book, Doing More with Less, prepare us for a globalized economy. It's not really regional ideologies or beliefs in government anymore. It's about how to approach the issue of doing business in the world. And we learn nowadays from around the world. And so, for example, in addition to basing some of the rediscovery in this book on Ben Franklin, there are great thinkers who have often taught the world how to do more with less. Here I think of Gandhi, or here I also think of someone like Joan of Arc. And so my book is a very popular return to that vital link between youthful competitiveness and adult responsibility. So 20th century capitalism was about competing on price and quality. 21st century capitalism is about competing on price and quality in a context of 7 billion smart souls. Souls in Brazil, souls in India, souls in China, souls in Indonesia, the 5th largest population in the world. So my arguments are looking, just like with my management consulting clients, focusing on the rapidly developing economies and asking fundamental financial and strategic questions. Take, for example, our client FMC, which is growing from 3 to 4 billion quite rapidly. They are makers of industrial chemicals, specialty chemicals like lithium and so forth, and also ag chemicals. And one of the things they're very aggressively doing is moving the feedstock of chemicals to biopolymers. They are buying up seaweed. 14.2% of the seaweed harvestable on Earth is now within their global domains. This is very much a global phenomenon because as the price of oil increases and as the volatility of oil increases, it's a smart chemical company that's going to find biopolymer-derived, renewable sources of chemicals rather than just the declining, escalating costs of oil. And we have found this principle adopted by many of our clients.
On one hand, Bruce, as many people will appreciate Gandhi as those who admire Franklin. On the other hand, I've got to ask you, the world today, with what you call its S frontier, is a lot different than the world they lived in, isn't it?
Excellent point, Becky. As intellectual history changes and material history changes, one has to recognize that the whole idea of last century about the Western frontier is obsolete. We live in a new S frontier where on the top of the S is the swiftness of information. Now, guys like Thomas Friedman began touching on that in his idea of globalization and the world is flat. But what I have shown in my experience is in addition to the swiftness, there is also an increase in severity of actions. And so by pursuing competition based on frugality rather than debt, you stabilize a response to that severity. You quicken your response to things and you also stabilize. So the price of energy volatility can be controlled a little bit better if you start finding recycled content, renewable content. Take, for example, our Warren Buffett client, Shaw Industries. They found a way to take their $320 million a year electricity bill, commit voluntarily the DOE to reduce it 25% across the next 10 years, and thereby save tens of millions of dollars. Well, how did they do it? They did it by looking at nylon 6 recycling. They did it by making their boilers more efficient. They did it by the hard work of competitive frugality.
Our viewers can't cut costs by themselves. These days, everything requires teamwork, doesn't it? But there are a lot of people in our organizations who you call knuckleheads. From your perspective, don't they often stand in the way of getting things done?
Yes, well here, Becky, you're asking the central question of responsible management, and that is, how do you construct a reliable team? I started out my life as a competitive basketball player, and that's how I won my scholarships to schools. Essentially, you're going to have a number of players in any given corporate situation, and the trick is to find that team that's loyal to the function of being competitive and frugal. Part of the process is identifying early the knuckleheads that are going to bring up really small and inconsequential things and fill up the meeting time. And so part of leadership today is to navigate past the knucklehead and to create the vital team of loyalty. You're also getting loyalty across time. And so there are people in my firm that have now been with me for 18 years. They know how I think. I know how they think. So while the world is going more swift and severe, I am emphasizing in the middle chapters of the book the power of doing more with less, how it attracts frugal people into teams, and how it attracts the surprising elements of loyalty.
In other words, it's a competitive advantage for the organization to develop future leaders who are able to think globally and who regard their work as value rather than finance.
Well, doing more with less is a set of principles in this book about how, like in a train with momentum, when you get the right balance of money, people, and rules as an executive, there is something unstoppable about frugality. Because what it gives the team is the certainty that they will play again in the future. And so the most important understanding is your positioning for future value. I think stock value is now so clearly not just about fixed assets, manufacturing capacity, domain, distribution. It's also about those intangible things, about how well the firm is positioned for the near future. So doing more with less acknowledges that the swiftness of information enables in every industrial sector the market to reward those that are better positioned for the near future.
Well, there's certainly a lot of talk about sustainability these days, Bruce. And as financial executives, our viewers are considered the stewards of their organization's assets. What does sustainability mean in the corporate context?
Sustainability is about competing for the near future in a more reliable and guaranteed way. So let me give you some examples of what competing on sustainability is. We all need a home. We all need a car. We all need IT. The firms of the future that know how to compete on sustainability will make a better car in terms of consuming less fuel, less materials, and will still have the added asset of comfortable mobility. The firm in IT in the future will obey the swiftness, but will probably have less heat per unit of data because we live in this age of electronics and sophistication and breakthrough in that. And so I believe that in all the fundamental market sectors that we work in, cars, homes, IT, they are all sharing this new 21st century emphasis on innovation, efficiency, and avoiding knuckleheads. And those are the principles that I have in this book.
The watchword in most businesses these days is transparency. So besides producing financial statements, many companies are also issuing so-called integrated reports that combine financial reporting with non-financial metrics. How likely is this trend to continue?
Great question, Becky, because you'll see our prediction is when you look at the financial recent reports of firms like Iberdrola, the Spanish energy company, or Baxter, if you look at their financial reports, you'll see that their financial reports are almost joining with sustainability disclosures. And you have to ask, why is that trend happening? It's happening for three fundamental reasons. And I believe all financial planners will see this soon enough. It's happening, one, because sustainability is a reliable surrogate for how well you're positioned for the future. So if you have arguments about how you're reducing your environmental impact, how you're reducing the costs of your supply chain, how you're respecting the trends of rules on sustainability, that becomes a useful surrogate for a view of good management. I think a second thing that's happening that's bringing these two traditions of transparency together is just the general ability of stock analysts to have dashboards that look at both financial disclosure requirements under Sarbanes-Oxley, operations and maintenance requirements, asset retirement obligations, and also this whole issue, is this product going to be adopted in a world of severe scarcity, right? I think a third thing that's happening is the new generation.
Well, I suppose it depends on how you define stakeholders as opposed to stockholders. Everyone from customers and suppliers to employees and regulators is a corporate stakeholder and is interested in sustainability, right?
There's been an extension of the word stockholder where it becomes increasingly significant to be aware of your critical stakeholders. And so we have developed models in which it's important for a company to understand if they think of themselves as a corporate mansion in a neighborhood, the question becomes, which circles of influence outside of your own mansion should you pay attention to as early warning signals? Often it's the think tanks, sometimes it's government, sometimes it's the NGOs. And many of the best firms that I work for now have measure and improve data which shows what the top 200 or top 50 stakeholders are thinking about the firm's moves as they prepare to make the moves. And this is what I call a firm ready to grow in its neighborhood, as opposed to a firm that might have its gross value diminished in a neighborhood.
Well, while we're focusing on your latest publication, Bruce, I've also got to ask you about your previous book, World Inc. To some extent, it sounds as if the world is increasingly looking to corporations rather than to governments to solve problems, doesn't it?
I think when you look at the big challenges before the 7 billion people on Earth, questions of poverty, questions of mobility, questions of disease resistance, questions of food as it relates to energy, all of those cut across the strategic, financial, corporate planning functions. And in the retreat of governments, in the case of austerity, it could be in Greece or it could be in Indonesia. What's going to happen in the retreat of government is going to be the ascent of what I called World Inc. firms. How do we balance the relationship between food needs and energy needs? That can't be decided by a government. That has to be decided by leading companies.
Well, some of those issues, Bruce, seem to be gaining momentum, don't they? I mean, do we really know the final outcome of the unrest from the Arab Spring? Could these world events have an impact at the corporate level?
I believe that one of the most interesting things that I took away by writing Doing More with Less in a time of the Arab Spring is that corporations may actually have a better handle on these three factors. What is the role of freedom in a life? What is the role of information in a life? And what is the role of self-determination? So there's a kind of groundswell of the understanding of what is good corporate governance that can actually help things like the Arab Spring.
You're not just looking in the rearview mirror at what Franklin and Gandhi said. Part of your work is being a futurist as well, Bruce. So tell me, what do you see as the role of corporations in the future?
Yeah, I think corporations have a very significant role in the future because they are the first selectors and cultivators of talent after high school and college. They have the ability to train people for the near future. A significant challenge remains, and that is how to train corporate executives to be global citizens rather than simply the most articulate, effective advocates of their own mansion.
As I expected, Bruce, you've covered a lot of ground for us this month. If our viewers could take one thought away from this presentation besides buying a copy of your latest book, what would you like that to be?
The thing I'd like you to take away, Becky, and your listeners, is that in a world of 7 billion souls, we're all sharing the same ocean and the same boat. And so you have to ask yourself, what is global citizenship when you're on that boat? And for me, it means you have to become more frugal, more inventive, and also more peace-loving. Those three variables will enable you to move your oar of your own life and your own firm forward in this time of turbulent seas.
Bruce Piasecki, author of Doing More with Less. Thanks for bringing us up to date.
My pleasure, Becky. Thank you.
That interview with Bruce Piasecki concludes the April 2012 edition of Financial Management Network. On behalf of everyone at FMN, thank you for joining us this month. We look forward to bringing you up to date again next month with our May 2012 release.